I started my Warhammer 40k journey back in 3rd edition, purchasing the starter set for that with the Dark Eldar fighting against the Black Templars. Unfortunately, I had no friends who were interested in playing Warhammer at the time there, so unfortunately it got put to one side and forgotten about. But eventually 4th edition came around and I started to attend the local games workshop in Dublin. I met a whole new kind of friend group in there who were obviously besotted by Warhammer, and I was hooked. I have not looked back since. I have not taken a single day's break from loving the hobby since then. And the first army that I started with when I went in there was Necrons, specifically this exact codex. This book in my hand was in my hand back then, playing against people and using that army. There was actually 2 staff members at the time working on Necron armies, and they had them on display in the cabinets. They were beautiful, and from that moment on I was in love. I started by buying the Battle Force and started to very quickly paint up the miniatures. If you can call what I did to those poor miniatures back then painting, but we shall move on. And eventually I came across what is my favorite piece of artwork then, and is still my favorite piece of artwork ever from Games Workshop, which is the Nightbringer descending upon an Imperial world like death. It is an absolutely incredible piece. Hopefully I can find a better kind of high-res image of it online and post it here for you so you can see it. And ever since then, the Nightbringer was on my brain. So I very quickly found out that you could purchase said model, which was this beast here. This is my actual Nightbringer, and my God, is it painted poorly. It's an awful looking thing, but I had it and I used it in many games and I loved it to death, and it meant so much to me back then. So of course, when Games Workshop sent me out the new Nightbringer miniature to paint up, I jumped at the opportunity to do so. So here he is in all his majestic glory, looking more like that piece of artwork than ever before. And I'm going to show you guys how to paint this model up with just a couple of dry brushes and a tiny bit of patience. He is not a complicated miniature, as complicated as he may look. So by the end of this, you will now be able to paint your Deathbringer absolutely no time at all and get it on the tabletop. So hopefully you guys will stick around and enjoy. Okay, originally with this piece, I was going to film a whole section of the video about constructing it. And basically I was trying to dispel, if it's going to be difficult to build, how many parts, is there anything tricky, anything like that. And unfortunately that section of the video just didn't happen, because as soon as I opened the kit and realized that the entire Nightbringer is a single sprue and he ain't that many pieces, which was a huge relief for me, because I do find more and more I am not enjoying the building process of miniatures. So yeah, to get this guy together in like, I don't know, an hour was a really nice feeling. So here he is, all constructed, the beast that he is, the Nightbringer, a literal star god. I got him sprayed with a kind of a black colored spray. It's not actually pure black, it's called Raven Black, so it's black with a little bit of grey in it, so it's not totally dark. It's actually the only one I had to hand at the moment. I probably would have gone pure black if I had it, but what are you going to do? This is my original Nightbringer, and as you can see, it is shambles. It looks awful, but I always liked the color scheme that I was going for back then, which was just a really nice solid black base coat and then just solid layering of dry brush over the top to build up that kind of rich, kind of dark blue to turquoise style scheme. So that's what I'm going to try and replicate with my more modern Nightbringer in today's video. So I started pulling out all my different blues and trying to work through what would be the correct ones, and trying to kind of line up the colors and what would work. And this was my first set and I realized that it wasn't going to work. The middle 2 didn't match and the last 2 were kind of too similar. So I started to scrap these, and I literally had like 15 blues on my desk trying to go back and forth, trying to mix and match. Eventually I kind of finished on this. This is where I thought it kind of works. Obviously Stegon Scale Green, Thousand Suns Blue, Thingy Blue, and a Hoth Blue. So it's going to be a really nice selection of colors. I do actually go with a very light layer of white as well later on, but we'll get to that. And as you can see, I'm not prepping the model after the black spray. It's black spray, and then we're immediately into dry brushing. And as you can see, I'm not going crazily heavy. I want that rich, dark base coat to be shining through with this model. And I know you've seen a bunch of examples of the Nightbringer painted up now on that community article and stuff, and people did loads of different styles. But to me, he's pure raw energy. He's a star god. There isn't really anything corporeal with him. I don't think he exists in one plane and, he gets on a Necron spaceship and he travels to the next world and then he comes out of the spaceship and continues to fight. No, he goes where he wants. He does what he wants. So in my head, he's more akin to something like the Silver Surfer. in that he wouldn't be loads of different colors. He would just be one kind of flow of color. So that's what I was going for. That's what I had in my head. And that's why I wanted to build up this kind of blue color. Obviously, we'll have arcs of green lighting and we'll have a couple of scarabs painted up for some kind of extra detail. But him himself, I'm not going to do anything different with the face. He's not going to get his eyes painted or his teeth painted. They're all the same material that his entire body is made from. Even his scythe, I imagine he just reaches out his hand and it just forms and he fights with it. It's not, you know, a silver shafted, silver spear kind of thing like that. At least that's how I think. I would love to know your thoughts and opinions. Do you feel the same way, or do you think the cloth should be one color, his face should be one color, and he's have a big stylized scythe or whatever? I don't know. It just doesn't fit right with me. And obviously this new model has so much nice detail, including lots of nice little sharp pieces of detail. And sharp detail is great for dry brushing. What's not great for this is the fact that the cutting mat that's underneath the model is black and the model itself is like a black blue. So it just keeps focusing on the cutting mat. So I do apologize for any time that does kind of cut out of frame. I do my best to try and remove as much of that footage as possible. But for this particular layer here, it just wouldn't show through. So yeah, you can see I'm using things like my thumb to brace some of the more fragile parts as I dry brush them, aiming for those kind of sharp edges. And basically all we're doing is going through that kind of selection of 4 blue colors, getting lighter and lighter with each one. And both lighter and lighter in color and lighter and lighter with how much pressure we're applying with the dry brush. Want to leave less paint behind with each time so you can see that nice gradient flow through it. I mean, I think back in the day when I started my Necron armies, Necrons as an army was, a lot of people could say it was quite a boring army. There wasn't that kind of broad selection of miniatures. And all the miniatures were fairly samey. They were all the same things. So everything was just silver with a green rod, nothing crazy. And then all of a sudden you had the Deceiver and the Nightbringer, which were these two kind of flashes of interest in the army. These things that just stood out and screamed. The Deceiver was always a cool model, but the Nightbringer, obviously, for me, screamed as a much cooler piece.
Man. Oh, fighter of the night, man. Oh, champion of the sun.
And like I said, I use this model in the majority of my games. If I was playing a game, I would have a Nightbringer. The average game back then was 1,500 points. And to take a 360 point model was almost unheard of. But I took him in pretty much every game and he would go across the battlefield and he would ruin people. Not a lot of people knew how to deal with him. He ignored all armor saves, all invulnerable saves. And he had 6 attacks, which back then, I know nowadays that's nothing. Back then, it was kind of crazy. He would walk up with 6 attacks, hit on 2s, wound on 2s, and everything. So he'd walk up to 6 Terminators and just go, 2's to hit, 2's to wound, your models are dead. Like... So yeah, he was a very cool thing, a very scary presence on the battlefield, and I loved the look on people's faces when he deployed him, because characters like this just, they tended not to be played with, tend to be ignored, or there was even a little bit of stigma and shame if you were using named characters and models like this back in the day. A lot of like antipathy towards cool characters, which thankfully has now gone away because I always hated that. I read a lot of the novels, so I get inspired by novels and stories and characters. And I always want to play a force that has those characters in it and recreate those armies. And I love it. It's my favorite thing to do. So you will most of the time find named characters lurking in my armies. And I will never apologize for that. So with the blue all dry brushed up to its final crescendo, at least I thought it was until we decided to do some white later on. We decided to work on the kind of electrical energy. So what I did was, once again, staying on that dry brushing buzz, I dry brushed all of that power areas with white, and then I threw a Corandrus green contrast, which is a really nice like electrical green, and I put quite a heavy coat of contrast across all of those pieces. After that, we got some lead belcher and we applied this to all of the floating scarabs. I didn't want to lock this guy down to a particular dynasty, so I just did them in silver. They've got a bit of carapace that I can repaint a different color if I decide he needs to match this army or that army. For now, like I said, I'm just going to leave them as complete flat silver. If you're doing a Necron army and you want it to match in, this is where you would blend him into that army. Whatever color the Necron carapace should be, should match the rest of your army. So while the lead belcher was on, we got a coat of Nuln oil across all of those scarabs as well. We made sure the silver was 100% dry before we did this. Just add a little bit of depth and a little bit of detail to it. And we actually didn't go back and like touch up the silver after that fact. What we did do is we once again waited for the green to be 1000, or sorry, the shade to be 1000% dry. And then we went in with moot green. And what we're doing with this is we're dry brushing all of those energy coils again. We are overshooting the dry brushing and hitting the scarabs quite a lot because we want to give a little bit of kind of like object source lighting. We want the electrical arcs to be beaming off of all of those metallic surfaces. And it does work. It looks really cool. It's very simple to do. Yeah, it just looks great. While we have moot green on the brush and a dry brush in our hands, I am going to hit selective areas of the Nightbringer himself as well with this, catching all those edges and just adding a nice green tinge throughout the model. This was a really kind of late development idea, but I think it works really well. And just once again, adds a little something extra kind of ethereal to him, and it looks really cool. I like the green energy. I think that moot green just really does make it pop and gives it that kind of warp lightning energy that seems to match. And here I am going through and hitting the actual model with the green, and as you can see, I'm not leaving much behind. I'm not going crazy, but that little tint of green I think is definitely adding something to the kind of murky blue gray that we have the whole model being as it is. We, of course, had to paint all of the glowing orbs on the little scarab. So a little coat of white, another coat of Corandra's green. And then we did layer up that Corandra's green again with a little bit of moot green with the brush, just to give it that kind of energy pop. And then, yeah, that's pretty much where we finished off with this model. I may perhaps add some grass tufts and stuff to the base later on. I'm just not 100% sure what way I want to base it. I just gave it a quick brown one for now, just to leave it as it is. And this is our finished Nightbringer. You can see the absolute, I think there's 6 layers of dry brushing throughout the blue-green now. And I think it shows through. I think it's a really interesting color. I think the green really adds a nice accent to it. I think he'll stand out a million miles in the middle of a Nightbringer, or in the middle of a Necron army. And I think he looks really cool. I'm really pleased with this final result. And it was 99% dry brushing. It didn't take a whole bunch of time. And I'm really happy with the results. I put a little bit of a blue tint on my photography lens for taking some pictures, because I think it really suits that kind of moon kind of aesthetic that he has, and I'm really happy with it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you did, make sure to give the video a like, make sure you subscribe. If you want to check out Patreon, help support the channel that way, that will be great. That's all linked down below. And thank you guys so much for sticking around to the end. I'll see you in the next one.